Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I review content from the WWE Network for your viewing pleasure. Last time I reviewed WrestleMania 17. This video will be all about WrestleMania 19. This is my second time filming this video. I filmed it before. It went about 30 minutes long. My videos can exceed 50 minutes now on YouTube, but I use the whole YouTube Capture bullshit app that I have on my phone, or I downloaded to my phone to upload this video to YouTube. It botched it all up and all that shit. Erased that, doing it again, hopefully trying to get it onto YouTube this time under this length. But nonetheless, this WrestleRant series will be going forward, as I mentioned in my last WrestleRant video, to review content that I watch on the WWE Network. Because I was on spring break last week, I was finally able to explore the WWE Network to its fullest, including watching The Rock's documentary, Stone Cold's I can almost say podcast, The Rock's documentary, Stone Cold's documentary, every episode of WWE Countdown, and watching the rest of WrestleMania 19. I started a few weeks ago. I watched the first few matches on my phone at various points at the beginning of March. So my memory might be a little shoddy when it comes to the first 3 or 4 matches from this show, but I watched the rest of the matches just a few days ago, so I finally finished WrestleMania 19, and I will probably be watching other WrestleManias before WrestleMania 30 in just a few weeks, in less than 2 weeks actually at this point. But nonetheless, let's get right down to WrestleMania 19. Kicking off the show, we had the Cruiserweight Championship match between Matt Hardy and Rey Mysterio, a very, very fun matchup. Matt Hardy was a great heel back in the day and was a very good heel when he turned again in 2009. That's when I really became a fan of his. But they botched it up, and that didn't last very long. But back in the day, back in 2003, he had Shannon Moore in his corner as the Cruiserweight Champion in this matchup. V1, Matt Hardy was who he was at the time. Rey Mysterio was a nice up-and-comer as well. A Cruiserweight Championship matchup to kick off the show is always a good idea. Very fun matchup. These two work very well together. Matt Hardy resorted to dirty tactics to successfully retain the Cruiserweight Championship, so very nice opener that helps set the stage and helps set the tone for the rest of the show. Up next, we had the Undertaker versus A-Train and Big Show in a handicap match. It was originally scheduled to be a tag team match involving Nathan Jones, but because due to an injury that he sustained in storyline before the show on Heat, he was taken out of this matchup. Now, I guess he suffered an injury in reality, but that didn't prevent him from making an appearance on this show. As he helped Undertaker pick up the victory, he interfered. For some odd reason, it didn't go to a disqualification because of that. I'm not really sure why. I thought it was because he was going to be involved in the matchup, and it became a tag team match at that point when he got involved. But Undertaker was announced as the sole winner, so that didn't make much sense to me. The match itself was a complete train wreck. Undertaker should not be competing in handicap matches against A-Train and Big Show of all people. Both talented wrestlers, but in the ring together, it's just not a good pairing of talent in the ring. So that then the match itself was just complete crap, in my opinion. Probably the lowest point of this entire show. What was an otherwise a very, very good show. Undertaker went over, and it's just funny to think at this point, 11 years later, Undertaker, almost 50 years old, celebrating his 49th birthday yesterday as I filmed this, would be on the second match on the WrestleMania card. Never in a million years would that ever happen again. It's just funny, but I guess this match kind of deserved that placement because every other match on the show was just so much better than this one. Up next, we had Trish Stratus versus Victoria versus Jazz for the Women's Championship. I believe Victoria was the Women's Champion going into this. I can't exactly remember, but what I do remember, because this is one of the matches that I watched a couple of weeks ago, so I don't really remember exactly, but it was a very good, well-wrestled women's matchup. Trish Stratus went over, and it was the new Women's Champion. She was extremely over at that point in time, one of the most memorable, one of the best women's wrestlers, if not the best women's wrestler in WWE history. That obviously showed in this matchup. Just all good chemistry between all three women, and the involvement of Stevie Richards as well was also fun, with Trish Stratus hitting her finisher on him as well. Jazz, I hadn't seen in action before the show all that much, so I was very impressed by her performance in this match as well. Very dominant women's wrestler at the time. So very good women's championship matchup. It's just sad watching this matchup and just comparing that to the current state of the Divas division with Total Divas and all that kind of stuff. Not to hit on Total Divas or anything, but just the current state of the tag team, or the current state of the women's division right now, the Divas division as they call it. It's just all about Total Divas and just not about the in-ring action, which is unfortunate, but I digress. Next matchup up on the card was a triple threat tag team match of WWE Tag Team Championships, pitting the current reigning tag team champions Team Angle, Shelton Benjamin and Charlie Haas respectively, against Los Guerreros, Eddie and Chavo, and Chris Benoit and Rhino. A very well-wrestled triple threat tag team match. Really enjoyed this match. All three teams had very, very good chemistry together. This is around the time that the WWE Tag Team titles were launched, because you remember that we had the SmackDown 6 in 2002 with Benoit, Angle, the Guerreros, and who were the other two? Rey Mysterio and Edge. And not all those 6 individuals were involved in this matchup, of course. Half of them were Benoit and Los Guerreros, but it was a very good tag team matchup. Benoit and Rhino obviously have history with one another. Team Angle was a great tandem, and I was glad to see them successfully retaining the tag team titles on the grand stage of them all. Obviously, being aligned with Kurt Angle at the time was a big promotion for them, so that was awesome. And Los Guerreros performed well here as well. So I thought this is a great tag team championship matchup, and hopefully we see something similar to this at WrestleMania 30 with the Usos, the Real Americans, and Rybaxel. And even though that matchup probably won't live up to this matchup, given the fact that Rybaxel's involved and not the Road Scholars, but that's another rant for another day. Moving on, the next matchup they had on the show was Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho. I had seen this matchup at least once or twice before on Chris Jericho's DVD. I bought it a number of years ago, and I know I've seen it before, as early as last year on Chris Jericho's Break the Walls Down DVD. Excellent DVD. Strongly recommend getting it if you haven't seen it already. But nonetheless, an excellent match from Jericho and HBK. I think one of the most underrated matches in WrestleMania history. I know it gets talked about a lot, but it just does not get enough credit. I know matches like Rock and Austin do, and as great as those matches were, as well as Bret versus Shawn Michaels and Shawn Michaels versus Stone Cold and Stone Cold versus Bret Hart, and all those kind of matches, as great as those matches were, they get the credit they deserve. I'll say that much. They get recalled on. They are brought up multiple times, when talking about the best Mania matches. And because this match was not a headliner between HBK and Jericho, it's not remembered as much as it should be. If you get what I mean by that, but easily. Anyway, it was a very, very good matchup. Excellent matchup from Jericho and HBK. Plenty of reversals. It got great time, a little over 20 minutes. HBK ended up picking up the victory, and they did a very good job of putting over HBK's back injury that retired him for 4 years. Jericho worked over the back. The walls of Jericho on the floor on the outside was an awesome spot. The plenty of reversals and the chemistry between the two, given that Jericho was sort of attempting to aspire to be the next Shawn Michaels, and early on in his career, and then went on to say that he wanted to be the first Chris Jericho. So I thought that was a great line in the build-up to their matchup in the video package that aired prior to the bout. But the reverses were very well done. Shawn Michaels went over, and then after the matchup, Jericho nailed HBK right in the nards to keep the match going, the angle going between the two. And they would revisit this rivalry 5 years later in 2008 in what would be the greatest feud of the PG era and one of the best feuds in WWE history, in my opinion. So easily one of the highlights of the show, but not the only highlight. We'll get more on that in just a little bit. Up next, we had Triple H versus Booker T for the World Heavyweight Championship match. A decent match for what it was. Booker T, I just don't see as a top star in WWE. He's very charismatic. He's good in the ring. He was over at the time when he got this push. But a few months prior to this, he was tag teaming with Goldust in the tag team division. Then all of a sudden, he's getting this major push at WrestleMania against Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. So it just didn't really add up all that well. I mean, the video package did a nice job of building Booker T up as a top star, as an equal to Triple H. But this was during Triple H's time when he was just dominating the entire Raw roster. And the fact that he was world champion, I think 5 times within the course of 3 years on Raw, was just ridiculous. Just a lot of long reigns too, and this was one of them. The match itself was kind of something you'd see on Raw, and the commentators just kept on the commentators didn't make it better. They didn't improve this matchup, in my opinion. They just Jerry Lawler kept on cracking jokes about how Booker T used to be in jail. That was the whole premise of this feud, which I thought was kind of stupid. They did the whole thing with MVP a few times when he was around in WWE years later. And they also made mention of the fact that Booker T was not a former world champion in WWE, but a former 5-time WCW champion. But then they basically said, in the simplest terms, that WCW was a joke. And maybe it is a joke, but you don't say that on commentary. You don't say that because during a match involving Booker T, no less, because it doesn't put him over as a threat to Triple H's title. And in the end, he wasn't a threat to Triple H's championship. Ric Flair interfered at least 3 or 4 times, which kind of annoyed me by the 4th time. And then Triple H reigns supreme and is still the World Heavyweight Champion. So like I said, the match was basically something you'd see on Raw. I wasn't really a fan of the matchup. It was just kind of there. Thankfully, though, we had the better matches after this one. Even still, though, for a World Championship matchup, you would expect this one to be better, but it wasn't bad enough that it ruined the show for me. Up next, we had Hulk Hogan versus Mr. McMahon. When I first saw this matchup announced, I thought it'd be a complete train wreck. I mean, Hulk Hogan isn't the greatest in-ring technician. We all know that. And Mr. McMahon is not even a wrestler. I mean, you can make some exceptions for a few feuds and matches here and there, but in the long scheme of things, he is not an active member of the WWE roster. However, this ended up being one of the most entertaining matches of the night, bar none. These two brawled the entire matchup. Early on, it was a little flat, but they've really picked up the pace down the stretch by incorporating blood, by Hogan going up the ladder at ringside and doing a big boot off the ladder. I think it was actually... No, Mr. McMahon, I think, was the one that did the big boot to Hogan through the commentating table. I can't remember exactly, but even still, it was an awesome spot and the best visual of the contest with Mr. McMahon rising up from the ring apron, from beside the ring apron, his face all bloodied with a huge grin on his face, just knowing that he had Hogan beat. So that was a great visual that is still remembered by fans to this day. And then we had the surprise return of Roddy Piper at WrestleMania 19. So that was awesome. The same man that was involved in the WrestleMania 1 main event with Hogan. So that the way they tied that in was very, very nice. Hopefully they do something similar with WrestleMania 30 this year with Hogan being there and all. But nonetheless, it was a very, very cool return from Roddy Piper, knocking out Hogan. McMahon thought he had the win there. No can do. Still had to put Hogan away. Hogan ended up picking up the victory with 3 big boots, or 3 leg drops, I should say. And that was that. So a very entertaining matchup. The crowd was into this matchup, I would say, from the first quarter to the end. So a much better matchup than I anticipated, or originally anticipated. And we also had an appearance from Shane McMahon. It was just kind of funny seeing that because, like I said, the last Mania that I watched was WrestleMania 17. And on that show, we had Shane McMahon facing his father. And then 2 years later, they're on the same team. So I thought he would hug Hogan or celebrate with Hogan. I guess that wasn't the case. I don't know what happened after this, what the whole aftermath, what that thing was. I know Hogan went on to feud with McMahon and Piper over on SmackDown as Captain America, and so on and so forth. I don't know what the involvement of Shane McMahon was, but even still, really enjoyed this matchup between Hogan and McMahon. Up next, we had The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. I really enjoyed the build-up to this matchup, or how they built this match up, in saying that The Rock could not beat Stone Cold when it mattered. Because if you can recall, these two faced each other at WrestleMania 15 and WrestleMania 17, and Stone Cold won both matches. And this was Rock's final chance to reign supreme over Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was already in Hollywood at this point doing his thing, and everyone knew by this point that Stone Cold was on his way out of the company, was ready to hang up his boots for good because his health wasn't in good standing. So this matchup, with that in mind, I mean, I was watching Stone Cold's documentary, and he was saying on his DVD that the night before this match, he had a medical scare. And you wouldn't even known that by watching this matchup. He had just a hell of a performance here. Same thing with The Rock, just doing each other's finishers, their own finishers. The Rock wearing Stone Cold's vest that said OMR for one more round on it. That was pretty cool. Just a great way to top off one of the best feuds in WWE history, if not the best feud in WWE history, between two of the biggest stars in WWE history. So I thought it was a great match. Rock was very entertaining as a heel at that point in time, but the bottom line was that he was a heel at the time, and he won cleanly in this matchup, which was pleasantly surprising. So he didn't need to go through any shenanigans or any interference, any crap like that. So I appreciated the fact that he reigned supreme here without any of that bull crap here. And we had The Rock going over cleanly as his sole victor. So that was pretty cool. And now he can say all these years later that he beat Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and John Cena at WrestleMania. So, with that being said, after the matchup, they exchanged words on the ground right as Rock made the pin and stood up. They were exchanging some words that was pretty emotional based off what the two said on their respective DVDs and their documentaries. Rock walked off to allow Stone Cold to celebrate by himself for one last celebration before he hung up his boots for good. And like I said, I don't think people knew at the time that this would be his final matchup. I don't really know. I wasn't watching at the time. You could tell me if you were. If you knew at the time that this would be Stone Cold's last matchup. I just assumed that a lot of fans assumed that this would be his last matchup. But with that in mind, though, this is a great final matchup for Stone Cold because I'm afraid we probably won't see him in the ring ever again in a physical role, at least, facing someone. Maybe, delivering a stunner, of course, but not in a match ever again. And of course, we had the main event for the WWE Championship. It pitted the 2003 Royal Rumble winner, Brock Lesnar, against the current reigning WWE Champion, Kurt Angle, and which was a technical masterpiece in my opinion. It wasn't the best Mania main event I've ever seen, but it was very well wrestled, very underrated in my opinion. I know a lot of people remember this match solely for the botch when that'd be a sight, when Brock Lesnar went for the shooting star press and he landed on his neck, a very scary spot, but it wasn't in the sense that it looked terrible, like it was the worst thing ever. It was just a scary spot that a lot of people were concerned for his health. But they recovered nicely by having Angle pin Lesnar. He kicked out at 2, followed up with the F5, picked up the victory, and was the new WWE Champion. So that was very cool. They shook hands after the matchup, putting Lesnar over in the process, and he only arrived in WWE a year prior. So that was pretty cool that they gave the main event slot to Brock Lesnar and Kurt Angle as opposed to Rock and Austin or Hogan and McMahon or even Triple H and Booker. They let the youth movement shine through with Brock Lesnar winning the championship for the second time in his career in the main event as the confetti rained down. The reaction to him winning, I think, would have been stronger had he won with the shooting star press. Very cool visual, just not the best execution because he landed on his neck, of course. So the reaction to the matchup after he won wasn't the best, if only because a lot of people were just more so concerned that he might be hurt. But even still, though, very, very good matchup that I don't think gets enough credit in my opinion, and it was a great way to close out Mania. So with all that being said, I really enjoyed this WrestleMania. I'm glad I checked it out. Almost the entire card was solid from top to bottom, with the exception of the Taker and Big Show and A-Train match and the handicap matchup. I'll excuse that. That wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. It was just a bad match, but you know what happens. But aside from that, though, I think everything else on the show was good to great to excellent to memorable to amazing. So I really, really enjoyed everything on the show. And to be quite honest, after watching this back-to-back with WrestleMania 17, I would say that I enjoyed this WrestleMania more. I think this WrestleMania had much more for everyone, had a little bit of everything, and had the technical masterpiece that was Lesnar versus Angle. Not an amazing matchup, but it was a very good matchup in my opinion. We had a brawl between Hogan and McMahon, and then we had the spectacle between Rock and Austin. Then you have your other decent matches. You have your tag team wrestling. You have your cruiserweights. You have your women's matches. So it was a little bit of everything. We also had a cat fight, too, which I failed to mention here, but that was nice filler for what it was. I will not complain about that. So with all that being said, I think this was better than 17 in my opinion. Maybe it was because of the fact I watched 17 at like 2 in the morning, and I watched this one earlier on in the night, and I just wanted 17 to be over by the time I was watching it. And with WrestleMania 19, I enjoyed. I didn't watch it from start to finish in one sitting. I watched it over the course of a few weeks. But even still, though, I enjoyed the card. I enjoyed every single matchup with the exception of the handicap matchup. So, yeah, WrestleMania 19 gets 2 thumbs up for me in my opinion. A lot of people said they want to see me review WrestleMania 20. So hopefully I will be able to watch that this weekend and review it for next Tuesday. So make sure to check that out as well. And with all that being said, WrestleMania 21 I also want to check out as well. Maybe WrestleMania 24. But aside from that, though, if you have any other suggestions for WrestleManias I should watch and review on my channel, make sure to leave a comment below. Tweet me on Twitter at WrestleRant. Like me on Facebook, all that good stuff. Make sure to subscribe as well. And this is GSM signing out. Till next time, guys.